Hi, this is lesson number 2 for history, Sec 3, Sec 3 history. All right, so I'm recording the lesson because Rian is not around and um, just in case if Elizabeth is coming in late, right? Okay, come. Let's look at a lesson review first, okay? I'm going to share sound. Okay, so let me pull it up to the full page so you can see the full page. Okay, all right. Now, last week we actually went through in great detail about the Paris Peace Conference and the League of Nations 1920s. As you can see that it is actually a very lengthy text and a very lengthy chapter. So we're going to review lesson 1 because it's been 2 weeks since we've done lesson 1 for history. So I'm going to go through the lesson again, the key points. Okay, I'm not going to go through the entire lesson, but I'm going to go through the key points only of lesson number 1. Okay, so in lesson number 1, we looked at the Treaty of Versailles. All right, I'm going to just skip this first for time being. All right, we are also going to look at how the Versailles was actually too harsh. Remember, okay, after World War One, and hold on for a second, and there was hyperinflation, and there was also a lot of discord among the people. All right. Before we start, I'll just go through very, very quickly about the Paris Peace Conference first to begin with. So the Paris Peace Conference actually came about after World War One. Okay, so there were the three main parties who decided they wanted to come join together to discuss about what they needed to do after World War One, because after World War One, there was a lot of discontent, and there were a lot of countries, especially Britain, France, and other countries which were badly affected by World War One. So they needed to make sure that a repeat of World War One would not occur again. Right, so they went through this Paris Peace Conference, and in this Paris Peace Conference, they also came up with a set of requirements, and this set of requirements are set up by, or it was proposed by the US Wilson Woodrow. Can you remember all these people or not? Can or not? Can, right? A little bit lah. If not, then I would have a few videos to show you to refresh your memory a bit. Okay, maybe later I will just do that. Okay, because both of you are didn't log on today, so it's hard to like gauge what you know and what you do not know. Okay, but generally what I actually planned for today's class is to actually have a pop quiz, a very, very simple pop quiz, as to refresh your memory a bit. Okay, now first question: which country made the first declaration of war, of World War One? Okay, which country? Is it Austria-Hungary, Russia, Serbia, or was it Yugoslavia? Who made the first declaration of war? That means, right, they declared, oh, we're going to war with you, okay? Which country did that? Now, if I can rewind back a little bit, before the declaration of war, something very, very important happened, isn't it? That caused that particular country to declare war. I hope you can remember the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. All right, he was the emperor of Austria-Hungary. Okay, and he was murdered in Serbia. All right, when he went to Serbia, he was murdered, right, by the nationalist group. And later on, of course, the people of Austria-Hungary were very, very angry, and they wanted to uh, avenge his murder or his assassination. But unfortunately, Serbia says, no, I'm not going to release that person. And therefore, all right, and therefore, Austria-Hungary was the first country that made declaration of war. Okay, it says if you don't give me your the people or the person who was responsible for assassinating our emperor, then we will declare war. So the answer is Austria-Hungary. Okay, so I'm going to just let me see where is my, hold on. I want to take my There you go. My laser pointed out, so I'm going to choose A. Austria-Hungary is the first country that made the first declaration of war. Okay. Now, next, which city was Franz Ferdinand assassinated? Is it Germany, Sarajevo, Serbia, or Austria-Hungary? Now, where was he assassinated? Now, first of all, where did he go first? All right, Franz Ferdinand actually visited Sarajevo. Okay, so the city that he was assassinated was Sarajevo. Now, there are three countries that made up the Triple Entente at the start of World War One. Can you remember three countries that made up the Triple Entente? Is it Britain, India, and Canada? Is it Russia, Britain, and France, Japan, Italy, and US, Iraq, Armenia, and Georgia? So, which three countries actually made up the Triple Entente at the start of World War One? Okay, the Triple Entente is like an alliance. So the three countries actually came up as an alliance, a stronger alliance, and together they were supposed to be stronger against its possible threats. So which are the three countries? So remember, the three countries are also very, very big countries or big empires to begin with. All right, the answer is Russia, Britain, and France. All right, so Britain and France is always the key, two key countries that actually make up the Triple Entente, and then Russia joined in as well. Okay, so it's Russia, Britain, and France. Number 4. Now, when did World War One start? Okay, so this is relatively easy. It's at the start of the 1900s. But which particular year did the World War One start? Is it 1913, 1914, 1915, or 1919? Okay, so take a guess. If you are not sure, you can actually take a guess. But generally, you should be able to answer this. Yeah, it is 1914. Okay, just remember it's 1914, the year when the World War One started. Okay, so these are the key information that you are required to be able to recall. So I'm just actually helping you to recall the information. Okay, what is the name given to Germany and its allies during World War One? Right? The name given to Germany and its allies. Is it Central Powers? Is it Axis Powers? Is it Allied Powers? Or is it the Eastern Bloc? Can you remember? It's definitely not the Central Powers, so it is the Axis Powers. Okay, they are known as the Axis Powers, the baddies lah. Okay, the baddies. Central Powers is the goodies. All right. So the Axis powers are basically principal members of the Axis powers are Germany, Italy. Okay, let's move on to which year did the US enter World War One? Which year did the US enter World War One? Now, US actually did not enter World War One until much, much later. Okay, so bearing in mind that World War One actually started in 1914 and ended in 1919, therefore it has to be either 1915 or 1917. But like I mentioned, I gave you the clue that the US entered very late, right, into World War One, which would make it the answer to be 1917. So the answer is 1917. Okay. US didn't enter until much later lah in the World War One, and that is the reason why that the US did not really incur that much of damage. The other reason why US also did not incur that much of a damage in terms of after World War One is because the World War One, the war was mainly centered around Europe, and America being across the Atlantic Ocean, it did not really bear much of of the damages of the war damages. Okay, so US only entered World War One in 1917, the year 1917. Okay, when did Germany sign the agreement to end World War One? Okay, so like I said, that the war actually ended in officially 1919, correct? 1919, from 1914 to 1919. So which year, or which is the date that Germany actually signed the agreement to end World War One? Okay, they signed it first earlier on, then later on it was announced officially. So which date did they sign? Okay, now sometimes if you're not sure of the answer, if you look at option C and D, one is 1917, the other one is 1914. So you know that D is definitely out of the question, right? 7 of April 1917 also out of the question because again it is too early. All right, so the other two options would be 1918, 11th of November, and 7th of November 1918. So which one is the later date? 11th November. Okay, so the answer is 11 November. They signed the agreement to end World War One. Now, who was the US president at the start of World War One? At the start of World War One, is it Winston Churchill? Is it Wilson Woodrow, Theodore Roosevelt, or is it Jimmy Carter? Okay, so out of the three, okay, if you recognize Winston Churchill, he's actually the Prime Minister of Great Britain at that time. So it can't be Winston Churchill. Wilson Woodrow, what do you think? Does his name ring a bell? All right, the next three, B, C, D, are actually American presidents, but which particular American president was involved in the start of World War One? Is it Roosevelt, Carter, or Woodrow? Okay, if your answer was Woodrow, then you are right. Okay, it was Wilson Woodrow. He's the same man who came up with the 14 points. Okay, which world major power never joined the League of Nations? Okay, now we're moving into the League of Nations. So after the Paris Peace Conference, Wilson Woodrow came up with 14 points, and one of his aims was to create these this neutral world organization that would have member countries, and these member countries would look into ensuring world peace. So which major power did not never joined at all? All right, is it Japan, US, Italy, or is it China? Okay, this one is relatively easy for you all to understand and to remember which one was actually not involved or never joined. Did Japan join? Did US join? Italy? Is it China? Okay, which one is it? Which world major power never joined US? Okay, now but then China also didn't join, but China at that time was not a world major power yet. All right, in 1919, China was not a major power, so China is actually out of the question. Okay, despite the fact that China never joined the league in 1919, right? They never joined, but at that time they were not a major power. So I'm looking for the world major power. So US is the world major power that never joined the League of Nations. So despite the fact that Wilson Woodrow, being the president of US, he was the one who coined up, right, the League of Nations. But unfortunately, US didn't join the League of Nations. It was not a member country because they were practicing the policy of isolationism. Okay, so the policy of isolationism means that if it's a war or if it's an issue that does not involve America, right? Because America actually lies across the Atlantic Ocean, away from most of the away from the European countries. All right, the World War One was actually based in Europe. It has got nothing to do with America at all. So America thought that right? There was actually no need for them to be involved, and then they practice isolationism. So that explains why they never joined the League of Nations. Okay, question number 10. Why did membership weaken the League of Nations? Now, if I can let you remind you all, right, that there were actually certain limitations to the League of Nations, despite the fact that in the early 1920s, there were some successes, but mainly there were a lot of difficulties, right, that the League of Nations encountered. Now, we're talking about membership, limited membership. If you look back at your notes, right, in your notes, there is actually the failures of the League of Nations. So under the failures of the League of Nations, there is actually one portion which is called limited membership. Limited membership means, right, that, all right, there were these members, the members of the League of Nations were mainly was actually mainly derived as a result of those countries that won, right, the World War One. Okay, so those were the so-called member countries. So those who won, they joined the League of Nations. So under this question, why did membership weaken the League of Nations? Because it caused reputational damage, as major powers did nothing when they were challenged, because most of the major powers like Britain and France, they were the ones who had the power of veto. All right, they had the power of veto. So therefore, because the members were mainly those who would agree to, they are the victors, victors of the war. So they tend to group together. Okay, so as they tend to group together, and then they did not really do a lot of, they didn't really act, right? The major powers did not act as when they were needed, and therefore it caused their reputation to be damaged. Okay, it's actually due to the weakened membership. Now they didn't have enough members. Okay, member countries. All right. What is collective security? Now, this is the aim of this is actually the aim of the League of Nations. One of the aims are one of which is collective security, and the other one is disarmament. Okay, so the League of Nations, its main aim is to promote peace. And what happens is that peace means that if there is any country that is being attacked or a state that is being attacked, the league members will then join in to act against aggressor. Acting against the aggressor does not mean to start a war with the aggressor. All right? It doesn't mean that they will attack the aggressor with war and weapons. No. To act against aggressor, they use normally softer techniques such as economic sanctions, right? And also negotiation. Okay, so when negotiations fail, then they will move into economic sanctions. Economic sanctions are actions, right, that a country or maybe a few states or countries can actually take against the aggressor. For example, if the country or aggressor country actually imports or exports goods from a member country, then the member country will then stop exporting or importing goods or have any trade dealings with the aggressor country or state. Get it? Okay, so those are economic sanctions. So economic sanctions are pretty soft. I call them soft approaches because it is not unlike a war. A war uses weapons, it's a very actionable cause where some form of violence actually takes place. But economic sanctions, no. It is just like a threat. Okay, you don't do this. Okay, so those are economic sanctions. It's very soft. Okay, very soft technique rather than wow, one big hit. Kena rotan. That is hard approach. This one is a soft approach. Okay, so let me see whether. Okay, all right. So collective security means one state being attacked, league members to join in to act against the aggressor. All right, they will act against aggressor. That's collective security. Now, so collective security is actually beneficial for smaller states. smaller states will find that collective security will work to their advantage, because since they are a small country, then they would need to have bigger countries to also be on their side, like in the event if they're being attacked. So that is one of the aims of the League of Nations. Okay. The other aim of the League of Nations is called disarmament. You can actually refer back to your notes. It's actually called disarmament. All right, the clause of disarmament means that countries should not have excessive amounts of weapons and military that can allow them to invade another country or act aggressively towards another country or threaten another country or state. Okay, so that's disarmament. Now, disarmament is harder to achieve because some countries would not let down their guard, because they feel that if I were to agree to this disarmament and I let down my guard, I'm open for attack. Okay, so disarmament is actually very, very difficult to achieve because countries and or states they generally have a sense of distrust. Okay, so with this general sense of distrust, they would not want to let their guard down, right? So that's why the league failed to some extent. Okay. Now, what was the aim of US at the Paris Peace Conference? So if you notice, I keep on harping on this, the aim of US, aim of Britain, aim of France. This means that it is a relatively, it is an important chapter to remember, okay? Now, US, just remember, US is a very peace-loving country, okay? First of all, they were not involved in World War One as much. They did not um, so they did not want to get into war during the early 1900s. So they were generally pro world peace. All right. So what was the main aim of US at the Paris Peace Conference? Was it to punish Germany harshly? All right. Is it to punish Germany and rebuild the nations? Is it to achieve world peace, to punish Germany and also world peace? Which one? So, like I said, US did not join the League of Nations. The US only went to the Paris Peace Conference to propose its 14 points and to propose the League of Nations to be formed. Okay, so the answer is C, to achieve world peace. Okay, so that was their aim, because they do not want other countries to get into war, because it will also be detrimental to US. Okay, other countries could be importers and exporters. All right, due to global trade, it will also affect trading relations or the economy of the US. Okay, so that's not what they want, right? They want world peace so that trade and industrialization can continue to grow. Now, there are three types of actions the league can take against an aggressor country. So, can you tell me the three types of actions the league can take against an aggressor country? Now, just now I told you, right, there was one which is called economic sanctions, right? All right, so besides that, there are also, all right, moral condemnation. So they always start off with moral condemnation first, telling off the aggressor country, okay, stop your aggression, all right, or else we will go to the next step. So if by moral condemnation, it doesn't work. Now, some countries, aggressor countries, they're called aggressor countries because they are aggressive. So being an aggressor country, do you think they would actually comply with moral condemnation? They wouldn't care. So the next step will be using economic sanctions, where member countries will stop trading with the aggressor country. But sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. So let's say, for example, if the aggressor country depends heavily on trade, right? Without trade, food and trading, their businesses will all stop, and it will cause a huge impact on the economy. Then yes, they may listen to economic sanctions. Okay, they may give in to the economic sanctions. Last but not least, military action. So this military action that the league actually takes is not a war per se, but they would actually depend on the member country's armed forces. All right. So let's say, for example, if an aggressor country were to attack, right, another smaller nation or smaller state, then after all the moral condemnation and economic sanctions also does not work, then after that, last but not least, they go through military action. but it also depends on the member countries contributing their armed forces. So let's say, for example, they ask Britain, can you please, can you maybe send some of your armed forces? So sometimes Britain may just turn a blind or a deaf ear because, of course, they do not want to cause um, any impact on their own armed forces, isn't it? Because once they send military or armed forces to another country, there is also the possibility of danger. Right? So most of the countries would not want to do this because they actually have a moral obligation to their own people, right? It's like, this is a war that's not my war to begin with. How come you send my people there? All right. So this is the very, very, very last resort, which is hardly taken. All right, hardly taken. Clear? So these are the three actions. All right, moral condemnation, economic sanctions, last but not least, military action. Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you what is the power of veto because in my notes I did mention the power of veto, but I wanted to make sure that you all understand what is the power of veto. Okay, only the big countries or the major powers, the major countries, powerful countries or powerful nations, they have a power of veto. That means when they vote, right, they have the power to sway the decision. Okay, power to sway the decision. Now, each country in the council actually has a vote. One single vote could block a decision being put into effect. So, if all the countries, right, of the member countries in the council, if they were to be pro, all right, pro or supporting the major powers in the council, they could vote for the major powers together with the major powers. Okay, so they have power of veto. And most of the member countries in the council, in the League of Nations Council, right, they are actually pro, or rather they are anti-Germany lah. Okay, anti-aggressor, anti-Germany lah. So they will follow the big leader lah, which is Britain and France at that time. Okay, so Britain and France actually has the power of veto. They can block a decision, right? Because they have power to block a decision, uh, because they have a greater number lah, of votes. Now, there is a name of the treaty that at the end of World War One. Can you remember the name of the treaty at the end of World War One? So in the Paris Peace Conference, they actually they coined up this particular treaty, and this particular treaty was deemed to be very unfair to Germany. Can you remember which treaty? What's the name of the treaty? Is it the Brest-Litovsk International Peace, Versailles, or Treaty to End All Wars? Yeah, this one you must remember very, very clearly. This is the Treaty of Versailles. So the Treaty of Versailles is the treaty that ended World War One. Okay, now which country was blamed for World War One in the Treaty of Versailles? Which country? This particular country had to take the sole blame of the effects and impacts of World War One. Okay, because this would be a precursor to our next chapter, which is Germany. Okay, so Germany was the country that was blamed lah. As much as you know, right, earlier on I did tell you the overview of how World War One actually started, because Austrian-Hungary Emperor went to Sarajevo. Okay, he visited Sarajevo. Before he went to visit Sarajevo, right, he was already warned, don't go there. But he was very adamant to go and visit. So unfortunately, he was actually assassinated. All right, so Austria-Hungary demanded that Sarajevo, the Serbs, to release the person, or to tell them who is the person to take action. But Serbia said no. Okay, so that's how Austria-Hungary decided to declare war. They declared war on. So Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Serbia is very close friends with Russia. All right, and then Germany is very close friends with Austria-Hungary. So Germany said, if Austria-Hungary, if you're going to go to war with Serbia, I will back you up. Okay, so ultimately Germany was blamed for the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, Now, because of militarism has been a major cause of the war, the framers of the Treaty of Versailles, framers means the people who were responsible for the Treaty of Versailles, what did they do? What did they do? Because they felt that militarism means the brutality of war, right? Going to war, invading another country, that was a major cause of war, right? And of course, the use of weapons. Okay, so therefore, the framers of the Treaty of Versailles, what did they do? Did they make Germany pay for reparations? Did they force Germany to sign the War Guilt Clause? Did they strip Germany of its territories, or did they bar Germany from maintaining a military? Now, this one you have to be very careful because all four is actually part of the clauses in the Treaty of Versailles. Now, the Treaty of Versailles actually forces Germany to pay war reparations. That means war damage, war expenses of all the countries that were involved, right? Germany had to pay them back, to repay them. That's why it's called war reparations. Number two, Germany was also required to sign the War Guilt Clause. The War Guilt Clause is actually one in which Germany has to accept, all right, the sole responsibility of the war of World War One. Okay, that is the War Guilt Clause. That means they are the one they take they become the scapegoat lah. No other countries um, would be blamed except for Germany. War Guilt Clause. Germany's territories were also stripped. That means after World War One, right, under the Treaty of Versailles, all the colonies and territories that were owned by Germany, it will then be distributed out to all the allies, okay, members of the League. Lastly, Germany was actually barred from maintaining a military, okay, because it was because of its mighty military that allowed Germany to invade so many other countries. Okay, so uh, the League of Nations actually, or the League of Nations and also the Treaty of Versailles, they barred Germany from maintaining a military. They could only have 100,000 armed forces, which are mainly voluntary armed forces only. Okay, voluntary. Okay, so the answer here is the key word is militarism, because militarism is a major cause of the war. Militarism being uh, invading another country and using war weapons, and the right, you have a lot of different forms of military to outdo your to outdo another nation. So okay, the framers of the Treaty of Versailles decided to bar Germany from maintaining a military. So without having a military, okay, their rationale is if Germany is barred from maintaining a military, then they will not be able to repeat what they have done before. They would not be able to invade another country ever again. Right? So the military that they were able to have are actually volunteer military, volunteer armed forces. They are not the real military. Okay? Right? It's just a voluntary group and only 100,000. All right, 100,000 armed forces. They were not allowed to have air force. They were not allowed to have submarines. They were not allowed to have a naval forces as well. Okay, nothing. Now, because of the Treaty of Versailles, Germany gave up 1 million square miles of land. Germany's government was restructured. Germany paid war reparations to the allies. Now, which one is it? Because of the Treaty of Versailles, did Germany give up its 1 million square miles of land? Yes, it did. Okay, which yeah, later on I will dwell a little bit more on that later. They actually gave up 1 million square miles of land. Was the Germany's government restructured? Yes, it was. Okay, Weimar government was actually restructured. And Germany, did they pay war reparations? Definitely. Okay, they actually paid war reparations to the allies. So it is all of the above. All right, all of the above. Now, what was Woodrow's proposed points that he brought to the treaty? Is it 7 points, 14 points, 10 points, 2 points? Which one? This one is easy, Don't know, must knock the head a bit. 14 points, okay? You don't have to memorize all the 14 points, but the key points is disarmaments, collective security, okay? lastly, what was the medium-term impact of the treaty on Germany? Now, in your notes, there were three different impacts: short-term impact, medium-term impact, and the long-term impact. All right. Now, the short-term impact is the step in the back theory lah. Step in the back means they felt, okay, because of the Treaty of Versailles, they felt betrayed, right? That's a immediate short-term impact. Second medium-term impact is the economy, right? Their economy suffered, right, because of the Treaty of Versailles. They took away a lot of the territories, and these territories were actually very resource-rich territories that were supposed to help boost the economy of Germany. Okay, and because they had to also pay the war reparations, right? They need money to pay the war reparations, right? So the medium term impact was loss of territories and the deterioration of their economy. So if you look back at your notes, right, in one of the pages I already indicated there are three impacts on the Treaty of Versailles. This is the medium term impact. The last impact, the long term impact, is where it caused the German people to switch alliance to very extreme political parties lah. They even considered the communist parties, and they even considered the Nazi parties, because they felt that the Treaty of Versailles that was forced upon them was a fault of the Weimar government. Okay, all right, can mm. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to let you all watch a few videos to refresh your memory a bit on the Treaty of Versailles. Just give me a moment. How come like this?
It's the 31st of July.
Okay, all right. I was looking at that. All right. Okay. Okay, just give me a moment, This, mm, okay, come, let's see
The
this.
Treaty of Versailles, 1919. World War I officially came to an end with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles on June 28, 1919. 32 countries had come together in Paris in January 1919 to hold a conference which would make peace after the First World War. It would be dominated by the Big Three: David Lloyd George representing Britain, George Clemenceau representing France, and Woodrow Wilson representing the USA. Germany was not invited. The Big Three wanted different things for Germany and disagreed on how harshly they were to be punished, reflecting how their countries were treated in the war. They had to negotiate with each other until there was a compromise. This was difficult because Wilson was opposed to harsh punishment for Germany. The USA had not been involved in the war as long as Britain and France and had not received as much damage. He wanted to prevent another world war by creating the League of Nations based on his 14 points, to ensure Germany would not be destroyed and that Germany shouldn't be blamed for the war. Clemenceau's aims were the harshest of the three, representing the damage Germany had done to France's land and people, and its threatening proximity. He wanted revenge and to punish Germany, to return Alsace-Lorraine to France, an independent Rhineland, no League of Nations, Germany to pay huge reparations for the damage and losses caused, the disbandment of the German army so that Germany would never be strong enough to attack France again. Lloyd George was an in-between. This reflected Britain, which had little land damage but high war losses. He wanted a punishment that would be tough enough to please those who wanted to make Germany pay, but would leave Germany strong enough to still trade. Land for Britain's empire, to safeguard Britain's naval supremacy. When the Treaty of Versailles was ready, Germany was shown the document, but there was no negotiation. Their rebuttal ignored. On 28 June 1919, the delegates met at the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles near Paris and forced 2 German representatives to sign it. See Part 2 to learn what the terms of the Treaty of Versailles were and the devastating effects it would have for the future of Germany. Watch our other videos to learn more. Get your
Look at the second
The Treaty of Versailles, 1919. The terms of the
one.
Treaty of Versailles can be divided into 3 groups: territorial, military, and financial and economic. Here are some of the territorial terms. Alsace-Lorraine was returned to France. Germany was forbidden to unite with Austria. Lands in East Germany, including the farmlands of Posen and the Polish corridor between East Germany and East Prussia, were given to Poland. The Saar, which had rich coal fields, were given to France for 15 years. All Germany's colonies were taken and given to France and Britain as mandates. Here are some of the military terms. The German army was restricted to only 100,000 men. The Navy could now only have 6 battleships and no submarines, and there was to be no air force allowed. The Rhineland was demilitarized. This meant the German army could not go to this area between France and Germany. For the financial and economic terms, Germany would have to pay reparations, which would eventually be set at an enormous 132 billion gold marks. On top of this, Germany was not allowed to join the League of Nations, and it had to accept responsibility for causing all the damage and loss by the war. Overall, the Treaty of Versailles was unpopular with Germany and its creators. Its terms would go on to be reversed by Germany in both secret and in the open by Hitler and help cause World War II. Watch our other videos to learn more. Get your copy of Simple History.
So I refresh your memory a bit on the Treaty of Versailles, right? Part 1, Part 2, that's very simplified version, okay? And you can actually source these videos online as well, okay? So it's actually very easy to obtain these videos, all right? Now let's look at another video. Was the Treaty of Versailles too harsh? Okay, a lot of people, historians, they believe that the treaty was actually too harsh because it caused Germany to feel right. It made Germany feel too too. Oops, sorry. It actually made Germany to feel very betrayed. Okay, let's look at it first. Where is it? Hold on. So Treaty of Versailles too harsh. Okay.
This episode of The Great War is sponsored.
Oh, I think I better not use that one because
By our supporters on Patreon. Financial desperation crashed in the quest for victory, and the economies of Europe took center stage, and it would not be an easy nut to crack.
okay, all right. This one is a much better one, huh? Okay.
4 years of economic and financial desperation had pushed all belligerent systems to the brink, and it had found them wanting. Now, very early on in the conflict, it became clear that business as usual was not good enough to maintain a nation at war. Trade was disrupted, industry was converted to war production, and workers were simply sent to the army. Every state struggled to find the money to keep up the fight. Now, at first, Germany had hoped to rely on short-term tax hikes to pay for the war. However, Germany's federal system meant that the central government in Berlin had little control over taxation in the federal states. In any case, taxation could only cover around 14% of total war costs. The remainder would have to be paid for through Kriegsanleihen, or war bonds. That is to say, money lent by individuals and companies to the state. And for a while, it seemed to work. In fact, Germany's war bonds campaigns were so successful that it was even able to lend money to its Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman allies. But despite this success, Germany's war debt continued to grow until it was over 90% of total government expenditure in 1918. The country's leaders hoped that the eventual spoils of victory would cover these debts. But this didn't happen, and may not even have worked if they had won. Germany's food supplies, which were poor even at the start of the war, reached crisis levels due to the blockade and a drop in international trade, which resulted in the so-called turnip winter of 1916 to 1917. And by 1918, the black market price of meat in Berlin was 25 times its 1914 level. As for Britain and France, they had some advantages over Germany in facing the strains of war, mostly due to their larger empires, more developed banking sectors, and their access to world trade. But even amongst the Allies, spending skyrocketed and debt grew. Initially, France also believed that it could self-finance the war through taxation and war bonds, but it was soon forced to borrow from Britain. Then Britain exhausted its money reserves as well, and had to turn to American lenders for capital. At first, the US government allowed US banks to give loans to the Allies. But by 1917, the US government itself was also issuing loans so that Britain could buy food and munitions from American companies. By 1918, Britain was importing around 4 times more from the US than it had back in 1914, while its exports were negligible. Now, once the war ended, much of Europe and the Middle East was in a state of total economic collapse. Food shortages were severe in many regions, especially where fighting continued into 1919 and 1920, and millions were threatened by famine. The situation was so serious that the American Relief Administration was sent to Europe to oversee the distribution of food to 23 countries, in particular in war-torn Russia. Its budget of $100 million, that's about $1.5 billion in today's money, which was matched by private donations, was testament to the scale of the problem. But in spite of American efforts, millions still went hungry. So, faced with an unprecedented crisis, in immediate economic terms, the Allies had little reason to celebrate when peace finally came. Instead, they now faced the daunting task of piecing together their broken economies. By 1918, Britain and France were heavily in debt. Their empires had been weakened, and worst of all, their lenders were now demanding repayment. Luckily for them, they had a heavily industrialized Germany to turn to for payments, and a treaty to enforce them. The Treaty of Versailles established a new order in Europe, and in a sense, in the world. The League of Nations, new borders, demilitarization, occupation, colonial mandates, it was all laid out in the document signed in June 1919. One of the most controversial aspects was Article 231, the so-called War Guilt Clause, which was added as a legal justification for demanding reparations from Germany. By signing the treaty, the Germans accepted full responsibility for the damage caused by the war and for repaying the victors. Now, the Allies knew that Germany would not be able to pay for everything, but the treaty reserved the right to impose penalties for damage to civilian and government property. The Allied and associated governments recognized that the resources of Germany are not adequate to make complete reparation for all such loss and damage. The Allied and associated governments, however, require, and Germany undertakes, that she will make compensation for all damage done to the civilian population of the Allied and associated powers and to their property. Now, the exact amount of reparations was to be determined by a separate inter-Allied reparation commission after the treaty was signed. For the victorious powers, especially for France, reparations were critical, since their own recovery and reconstruction of areas devastated by the fighting depended on German payments. So, the treaty wasn't just about ending the war and swapping territory. It also had an important economic component that would shape post-war Europe. And this has been the cause of much controversy amongst historians, but it was also hotly debated at the time. Foremost amongst the economists who opposed the Versailles Treaty was John Maynard Keynes, a British mathematician and representative at the Paris Peace Conference. Keynes was prominent and was friends with influential figures like Bertrand Russell, Duncan Grant, Vanessa Bell, and Virginia Woolf. He also worked closely with British Prime Minister David Lloyd George and was central to developing one side of the great debate which gripped the conference. Should Germany be economically crippled for years to come, or should it be allowed to rebuild and rejoin the international community? From the outset, Keynes, who was a conscientious objector, was against the imposition of heavy reparations on Germany, and instead advocated for leniency. Initially, it seemed that Lloyd George was receptive to his ideas. However, he soon discovered that the British public and some of his economist colleagues did not share this point of view, because most Britons wanted Germany to be punished. With Keynes's ideas falling on deaf ears, he became disillusioned, and he resigned his position at the peace conference before the treaty was signed. He then began writing a blistering critique of Versailles and its creators. The Economic Consequences of the Peace was released in December 1919 and was a broadside against Versailles and the peace process, criticized the Big Four, and made dark predictions for Europe's future. Keynes argued that the continent was a single economic unit, tied together not just through geography, but also via a trade system that increased the well-being and quality of life for all Europeans. Disrupting this economic ecosystem with what he saw as impossibly high reparations not only made poor economic sense, but it was downright dangerous. Instead, Keynes claimed that the treaty was mostly dictated by vengeance, greed, political opportunism, and even self-delusion, as states scrambled to redraw borders and gain traditional great power prestige, while ignoring the economic realities the war had created. The treaty includes no provisions for the economic rehabilitation of Europe. Nothing to make the defeated Central Powers into good neighbors, nothing to stabilize the new states of Europe, nothing to reclaim Russia. Nor does it promote in any way a compact of solidarity amongst the Allies themselves. No arrangement was reached at Paris for restoring the disordered finances of France and Italy, or to adjust the systems of the old world and the new. Now, Keynes was originally optimistic about the idealism of US President Woodrow Wilson and his 14 points, including the League of Nations. But he would eventually criticize the actions of all the national leaders at Versailles. For Keynes, Clemenceau just wanted to crush Germany into oblivion. Lloyd George wanted to appease the British public in the short term, while the US president became paralyzed by domestic ambivalence and an ambiguous desire to do justice, which was easily manipulated by others. Keynes proposed 4 revisions to the treaty. First, reparations payments, on which no limit had yet been set, should be reduced or forgiven altogether.
Okay. That was the key thing that I wanted you to also listen to was actually the debate about the Treaty of Versailles and the economic consequences of the peace. And this was directly from Britain because originally Britain didn't really wanted to have such harsh reparations. They did not want to have such harsh treatment of Germany because they were warned, all right? Keynes is actually a very, very famous economist, and up until today, there is a Keynes theory. So next time when you study economics, right, you will also study the Keynes theory. And Keynes actually has some truth in what he actually says because all these countries were actually interconnected with one another through trade. All right, so it doesn't really make economic sense, right, to suppress Germany such that they are not able to rebuild their economy. And the fact that Keynes already warned, right, not to have such harsh reparations. So as you can see, right, early, you can hear just now, the war reparations, the amount of the war reparations, right, is actually way above, right, way above what it is actually meant to be. Okay, so the amount which was stated in the Treaty of Versailles in today's currency or in today's value, money value, it is actually up to about $400 billion. Okay, so at that time, all right, where Germany was being forced to sign the war guilt clause, all right, they were also required to pay all the war reparations. And on top of that, they also took away their territories. So if you take away their territories, their rich resource industries, they forfeited all their industries that were producing coal, iron, and steel. Then obviously they didn't have anything they didn't have anything to restart the economy. So that's why they had no choice lah, but they had to uh, print more money. Okay, okay. So Germany had no choice lah. They printed more money, and as you have studied Sec 2 history before, right? The Japanese also printed money, correct? Now, so what do you think is the impact of printing money? It will actually cause hyperinflation. Okay, so hyperinflation actually occurred. So, John Maynard Keynes and Wilson Woodrow actually shared the same thinking. They were thinking along the same lines. They felt that they didn't need, I mean, the League of Nations did not really need to punish Germany that severely, give them a chance to actually recuperate or rehabilitate, lah, okay, and join the international countries, right, to actually join the international stage at some point in time. But unfortunately, this was not meant to be, lah. Okay. So unfortunately, John Maynard Keynes was also he proposed, he proposed to David Lloyd George, but then again David Lloyd George was because he succumbed to the public's opinion, right? Because he was just newly elected as the Prime Minister of Britain, so he also needed to keep his popularity lah. Okay, so he wanted to also make sure that the public don't call for his resignation, correct or not? So because members of the public were all calling for harsh treatment of Germany, especially I mean members of the public lah, people, because they sent their soldiers to fight the war against Germany, so they really wanted revenge. Okay, and that's why they placed a lot of pressure on David Lloyd George to sign, to agree to the war guilt clause in the Treaty of Versailles. All right. Okay, so you have a clearer understanding of the Treaty of Versailles and the impacts that it actually has created as a result of, no, as a result of the World War One. Okay, so there were two camps lah. Of course, we have France on the other side. France was very adamant to ensure that Germany was very, very harshly being treated. Okay, now during the first lesson, right, I actually gave you all a piece of work to do. Okay, I'm going to go to that particular answers. I've actually sent the answers to you, right? Elizabeth, I've sent to you, right? So, but what I want to do is I'm going to go through the answers. Okay, this was the piece of homework that I requested you all to do. This is inside your SEQ worksheet. All right, the worksheet that I've given you. Okay, just give me a moment. I just want to maximize the screen so that you all can see it clearer. All right, now here you go. All right, so for every essay that you attempt, it's good for you to send it to me and also practice writing. And of course, on top of that, right, I will also provide you even more greater detail. Now, you notice that the SEQ notes that accompany, each chapter, it is very much what I call it is also summarized to a certain extent, okay, because if I don't summarize it, it's going to be very, very, very thick, okay. But when we are doing SEQs, that means essay preparations, that is where I will put in more details for you, already make your essay more robust, okay. Now, this question says, explain the aims of Britain and France in the Paris Peace Conference. So there are, okay, this is just a practice, okay. Now this is just a very, very quick practice because the formula or the format for the new essays for the new syllabus 2023, where you'll be taking the 2024 exam. All right, there will no longer be the 8-mark question lah, but I put the 8-mark question here first because as newbies you need to learn how to write an 8-mark question, 8-mark essay question to begin with. If I give you a 10-mark essay question, it can be actually quite scary, right? Not okay. So we'll do the 8-mark first, and then I will then teach you how to move on to the 10-mark question. Okay. Now, here it says, explain the aims of Britain and France in the Paris Peace Conference. So you're only looking at the aims of Britain and the aims of France. No need to look at the US first, okay? Now, so you would notice that the points that I have, okay, it already tell you what was the aim of Britain. Now, Britain was actually very torn between punishing Germany and at the same time to protect its economic and political status. They were torn. All right, remember the video that I just showed you just now? All right, John Maynard Keynes, who is an advisor to David Lloyd George, he already warned them that it's actually very important to protect the Britain's economy and also not to punish lah. So they were torn. Okay, Britain was actually torn between punishing Germany and at the same time wanting to protect its economic and political status. Now there were a few reasons, okay, where they feel torn between doing what is good or doing what is right and also to its own advantage. Okay, so they also needed to protect themselves. They were also afraid of Germany being too strong. Okay, so first of all, the first aim where their torn is to maintain naval supremacy. So this is to protect its own political status. So this is one of the aims of Britain where they needed to maintain its political status. So Britain was actually the biggest navy in the world, but it was very apprehensive about Wilson's plan for freedom of the seas, because freedom of the seas is very, it it is too democratic, okay, for Britain to actually accept. So, and they were very, very scared because freedom of the seas would actually lead to future naval threats to Britain. And Britain cannot accept the fact that they could be, threatened by another naval force, right? Britain at that time had the largest and the strongest navy in the world. Okay, so they were very afraid because the freedom of the seas being too democratic, right? Other nations could actually sail towards Britain's territorial waters. There's no boundaries. So after the negotiations, luckily Wilson actually dropped this issue during the subsequent negotiations. Okay, but therefore, one of the aim of the British government, right, in the Paris Peace Conference was to eliminate German naval threat that already existed before and during the First World War. Remember, German naval threat was, no, Germany's naval force was actually beginning to build up significantly, and of course, Britain could not accept the fact that Germany could also overtake, okay, Britain's naval supremacy. So that is one of the reasons why he was very torn, okay, in that decision. What the second one is to preserve Britain's economy. Well, so the aim of one of the aims of the British was to see Germany, as a to be able to remove Germany as an economic threat lah. Okay, because they needed to preserve Britain's economy. Now, Germany was actually a very progressive and industrialized country already at that time. So they also saw Germany as a threat to economic prosperity because they didn't want Germany's economy to overtake, right, Britain. But at the same time, okay, um, at the same time they were also concerned. That's why John Maynard Keynes was the one who tried to convince David Lloyd George not to impose such harsh war reparations. Of course, David Lloyd George did not listen. Okay, they needed to preserve their own economy first. So the other part of another aim of the British, right, in the Paris Peace Conference was to diversify Germany's colonies. So this was something that he wanted to do to divert, not divest. Sorry, this is my typo error. Divert Germany of its colonies. Now, because Germany actually had a lot of colonies prior to the war, so it was they wanted to give away a lot of these Germany's colonies, and these Germany's colonies, right? Of course, Britain desired to take over some of Germany's colonies because the more colonies you have, the more raw resources. Correct. So Britain actually wanted to take over some of Germany's trade and to also deprive Germany of its colonies, take over these colonies as well. But of course, Wilson Woodrow's self-determination. Remember, if you look back a few steps, right, one of the things that Wilson Woodrow actually advocated was self-determination, to allow countries to choose which nation that they wanted as their own government. All right, that means a colony would not exist. Now, Wilson Woodrow was actually trying to do away with colonialization. Colonialization was like almost to the US to the Americans. They felt that it was like almost close to slavery okay, getting all raping that country of its raw resources for themselves. Okay, that's unfair, and it's also not humane. Right? But by diversifying Germany's colonies, Britain saw it as a guarantee to make sure that no future Germany navy can exist because there's no ports. Because once you deprive Germany of its colonies, right, it will not allow them to have ports all over now. Germany is actually landlocked, if you can remember, landlocked. It doesn't have surrounding sea. There is no coastal area in Germany. Correct? So for Germany to actually have naval forces, they need to have colonies that is near or next to a coast. Get what I mean? Alright, so that's why they needed to take away and deprive Germany of all its colonies so that there is no way that Germany can actually exist to form a navy. Alright, they cannot revive their navy anymore. And of course, colonies to the British was actually seen as a form of reward. They will get all their raw resources and also money. Now, Britain also saw the rise of communism already at that time. They were very afraid that uh, the spread of communism would eventually spread into Germany. So as a result, Britain said, okay, I want Germany as a buffer state. Do not want to weaken them as much. They only wanted Germany to be a buffer state so that the spread of communists from Russia, right, or the new Soviet state would not be able to spread as quickly. So Germany being the middle party, all right, okay, because UK is here, Britain is here, all right. Then they have Germany. Of course, there are also other surrounding European countries, but then it will be further away, putting it's like a barrier against the Russian or the Soviet state. Okay. Now, last but not least, Britain also saw Germany's wanted to rehabilitate Germany's economy. So you can see the how they are torn between the first 4 points, right? First 5 points, right? Well, actually for their own selfish reasons, all right. They also wanted to be ahead. They also wanted to protect themselves, correct? But at the same time, right, Britain was also wanting to allow Germany to rehabilitate its economy. Okay, why? Because if they want Germany to repay, right, the war reparations, they need money. And the sooner Germany is being rehabilitated, the sooner that they will be able to stabilize international trade. Okay, so that is the reason why Britain was actually torn, because there's also the greed lah, all right, the greed and also the power and the greed that came along with it. But at the same time, they felt that if I'm too greedy, right, it will also cause Germany's economy to fail. But of course, right, ultimately, as we all know, Britain, well, basically they succumb lah to their selfishness. Okay, so they signed the, right, they imposed the war reparations, all right, because there were so many benefits to them, you know. You look at all the benefits. Okay, so that's the reason why they were torn between punishing Germany and at the same time, right, wanting to protect its own economic and political status. Alrighty, okay. So as a result, Britain was, sorry again, my typo, was torn between its self-interest in protecting its economy and political ideology and world peace. Okay, so those were the aims of Britain. Now, I've got a summary diagram for British aims for the Paris Peace Conference 1919. This is to allow you to have a clearer picture or a mind map of British aims for Paris Peace Conference. So, PPC is actually Paris Peace Conference in short. Okay, all right. So there are four main aims. Of course, war reparations. They wanted to, of course, they encouraged Germany to recover economically. They wanted naval supremacy and also colonial expansion for Britain. Okay, so it's actually all there in your notes. It's all there, but I decided I wanted to expand more, right, for your greater understanding. Okay, because you're all still very new to history. This Sec 3 history. Okay, so finished with the British aims. Let's move on to um, France. Now, France, as you know, right? France, of course, they are they are plagued with. They wanted revenge, but why? What actually caused German to the France to be so harsh? Okay, there must be a reason to it. Now, the reason is that I felt that I needed to add on, to write out the answer and to add on this background for you all. It's because in your textbook, they didn't say it. Okay, they didn't specifically talk about the background lah. Okay, as to why France was so angry and full of hatred towards Germany. Okay, but after I have explained this to you, right, then you realize, oh, okay, that's the reason why, and it appears to be quite reasonable lah. Okay, because if you put yourself in the shoes of the French, all right, you will then know why. Okay, now, so first of all, the aim of France was to weaken Germany permanently. Okay, France is very, very extreme, very, very extreme on the scale. They were very, very angry. They was full of hatred, like what the video earlier on I told you, right? It's stem based on provoke lah, based on revenge. Okay, now we rewind back a little bit in 1914. Okay, July 1914. So the Russian government ordered mobilization of its forces in reaction to Austria-Hungary's declaration of war on Serbia. Remember that before the start, okay, when Austria-Hungary declared, I'm going to go on to war with Serbia. So Russian government actually mobilized its forces. So Germany believed that the war between Russia and its ally Austria-Hungary was possible. Okay, so Germany said, okay, possible war can actually happen because right now, uh, Austria-Hungary already declared war, but Germany is going to support Austria-Hungary, and of course, Russia said, I will come and support my good friend Serbia. Okay, so this actually led Germany to put on a plan into action. It's called the Schlieffen Plan. And in this plan, right, they openly declared war on France. Now, take note, at this particular point in time, was France involved or not? Was France involved? It wasn't, right? France was actually not an ally of Serbia, right? Now, the plan depended on defeating the French, which is an ally of Russia, a friend of Russia. Okay, because now why did Germany wanted to do that? Because Russia said that they will support Serbia. Okay, so they wanted to hit back at Russia by invading or defeating the French. Okay, so before the Russian army was actually fully prepared for war, right, they unprovoked, they went ahead to attack the French for no good reason. All right, now Russia has not even said, oh, I will, France did not even say, I will, I will get involved. None. It's just so happened that France was actually an ally or a friend of Russia. So this unprovoked attack led to the death of 1.3 million French soldiers and wounding millions more. If I'm not mistaken, right, the number is about close to 1.7. All right, 1.7. It also meant that the destruction of most of northern France and massive war debt. So imagine France was actually unprepared at all, and all of a sudden, boom, suddenly being attacked by Germany for no good reason, right? So just because I'm a friend of Russia, and then Germany decides to attack me. So France suffered tremendous loss and damage. Okay, so that's the reason why. So that's why France wanted to guarantee that Germany would never ever attack them ever again, because they were attacked unprovoked. All right, so France felt that it was a very uncalled for move by Germany, and this time around they wanted to, after the World War One, that's why they wanted to avenge, all right, the actions of Germany. Get it? Okay. Now, next, they wanted them to pay for war reparations. Now, France actually owed about 3.5 billion to Britain and the US as a result of the First World War. Now, how did that owing of the money come from? It's because they needed to buy weapons. Okay, they couldn't build their weapons on time, so they would buy these weapons, right, from US and Britain. So the owing of the debt was $3.5 billion. And then on top of that, right, France also lent 12 billion francs to Russia. Okay, so when the Bolshevik government, okay, under Lenin, took over Soviet Union, right, and created Soviet Union, right, these funds were never ever repaid. The 12 billion francs lost. So imagine, right, the total loss to France. How much was it? Right, close to had to pay lah. Had to pay about close to 15.5 billion to both Britain, France, and then of course Russia. The 12 billion already gone. So during the war, which was unprovoked, and also in World War One, thousands of businesses in France, factories, mines, homes were totally destroyed in northern France. Okay, so it severely damaged France's economy. And because they were carrying a very heavy debt, France would not be able to recover lah. Okay, so that was the reason why France believed that Germany should receive, right, severe penalties to war reparations as a form of punishment. Okay, so at least now you have a background knowledge as to why France is so, I would call so harsh. I won't call them wicked, right? But harsh. But because now that you know the background as to why France acted in such a harsh manner, it's because they lost big. They really, really lost a lot. Okay. Now they also demanded all the territories to be returned back to France, especially Alsace-Lorraine. All right, during World War One, it was taken away, and now they wanted back these Alsace and Lorraine. Okay, because it was annexed by the newly formed German state in 1871. So these these provinces, Alsace and Lorraine, were actually France territories, and these were very rich coal and iron mines. So um, during the 14 points, Wilson Woodrow's 14 points required the return of Alsace and Lorraine to France. And of course, this was very agreeable to the French, because Alsace and Lorraine are money making. Right? They call it the cash cows. Okay, right. So as a result, okay, France wanted to punish Germany harshly, because by punishing Germany harshly, it will allow France to rebuild its economy quicker, and to also ensure that Germany in the future would not be able to wage war and aggression on France. Okay, so these are the two reasons explaining the terms of the treaty on Germany. Now, again, I also have the diagram. So this diagram is actually much, much bigger. Alsace-Lorraine, Poland to be created, Rhineland, the buffer state, French colonies from Ottoman. These are all the territorial aims or territorial aims. Okay, so there were three main aims: territorial aims, war reparations, and military consideration. So from this mind map, at least um, it summarizes, right, all the aims of the French under the Paris Peace Conference. Okay, all right. think we will have some time to actually start with a little video on the Weimar Republic. Okay, so this is something that I will be sending to you all. Okay, yes. Stop share this. Moving on to, all right, close this one. All right. Okay, so now we are moving to chapter 2, but of course, I'm going to give you an overview of the Weimar Republic. So we are moving into the case study of Germany. This is where it gets all very, very interesting, okay? Okay, I'm going to start off with, sorry, I'm going to start off with a video on the Weimar Republic, okay? Now, who ruled Germany before Hitler? This is a background because it's important to give you a background, or else you will find it very difficult to comprehend what's going on. Okay? Uh, see, now check, make sure that I've shared screen. Okay, good. All right, share. Moving on to big screen. Okay, move my picture up and we'll start. So this is the Weimar Republic. So after the signing of the end of World War One, when they officially ended, right, there was actually a new government that was actually formed, like the Weimar Republic, they call it, okay?
1918 to 1933. By autumn 1918, it became clear that Germany could not win World War I. On October 29th, at the small coastal town of Wilhelmshaven in the northwest of Germany, sailors mutinied instead of following orders to attack the British Royal Navy. The mutinies quickly spread to the major German port city of Kiel, and this incident sparked the German Revolution. Rebellions rapidly spread across the nation and forced Kaiser Wilhelm II, who had lost the support of the German military, to abdicate on November 9, 1918. Following the Kaiser's abdication, Germany became a republic, and Friedrich Ebert, the leader of the majority Social Democratic Party, or MSPD, became the Chancellor of Germany. In January 1919, democratic elections were held that gave the MSPD and the Independent Social Democratic Party of Germany the most seats in a new National Assembly. This was followed by the election of Ebert as Reich President in August. As Berlin was deemed too unsafe due to the Spartacist uprising, the assembly instead met in the city of Weimar. On June 28, 1919, Germany signed the Treaty of Versailles, officially ending World War I. Germany agreed to relinquish more than 27,000 square miles of territory, decrease its military to no more than 100,000 men, and pay sizable reparations to the Allies only through a positive trade balance. Germany was also prohibited from joining the newly established League of Nations peacemaking body. In August 1919, President Ebert signed the Weimar Constitution into law. The Constitution established the German Reich as a republic with a president, chancellor, and parliament. The Constitution allowed for parliamentary elections every 4 years, with individuals over the age of 20 able to vote in the election. Presidential terms were 7 years long, combined with the possibility of re-election. All presidential orders had to be endorsed by the Chancellor or head of the Reichstag. The German people were guaranteed freedom of expression, assembly, and religion, alongside access to public education, private property, and equal workplace opportunities. The president had the authority to suspend civil rights according to Article 48. While Article 48 said this could only take place in an emergency, it importantly did not define what in fact constituted an emergency. Germany in crisis. When the Weimar government took power, Germany was in the midst of a financial crisis. Hyperinflation, largely brought on by the German government's priority to tackle sovereign debt, had crippled the country. As a result, ordinary citizens struggled to afford to buy a loaf of bread. In Berlin, a loaf cost 41 times more at the end of 1922 than it did at the end of 1921. Banknotes had lost so much value and were so abundant, it was not unusual to see people burning them to keep warm in the colder winters, or even using them as toilet paper. When Germany was unable to make reparation payments to the Allies in late 1922, Belgium and France proceeded to occupy German coal mines, railways, and steel factories in the industrial area of the Ruhr Valley in the following year. These industries were all critical in the rebuilding process of Germany's economy. Germany ordered its workers not to cooperate with the French and Belgian occupiers and paid their wages if they participated in a so-called passive resistance. In response, the French expelled tens of thousands of Germans from the region and shot dozens of resistors. Because Germany could not generate revenue, they simply printed more money. By autumn 1923, it cost more to print a German mark than it was worth. Bitterness and economic strife bred discontent within Germany, especially among the military, who believed that signing the Treaty of Versailles was a betrayal of the German people by the country's politicians. Throughout 1923, violence broke out and rival political parties emerged to challenge the Weimar government. Left-wing parties briefly formed coalition governments in the provinces of Thuringia and Saxony. A nationalist group called the Black Reichswehr attempted a putsch or military coup in Küstrin, as did a fascist group called the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or NSDAP, in Munich. Economic and social recovery. In 1923, the newly elected Chancellor, Gustav Stresemann, implemented several actions that aided Germany's recovery. He ordered the Ruhr Valley workers back into the factories. A new form of currency, the Rentenmark, was implemented under his cabinet, and he promised to pay reparations so that the French and Belgian forces would withdraw from the Ruhr in 1925. The Dawes Plan, named after the U.S. banker and U.S. President's budget director Charles Dawes, lobbied for German financial control of the Ruhr and a more reasonable reparation payment plan. Proposed and accepted in 1924, the Dawes Plan reduced the number of payments and loaned Germany money from the United States. Stresemann and his cabinet's efforts, especially the Dawes Plan, resulted in what's been called the Golden Twenties of the Weimar Republic. Tensions between the Allies and Germany began to wane. Wages rose, manufacturing increased, and Germany took over their pre-war export levels by 1929. There were, of course, still struggles, however. These included no significant agricultural gains, high levels of unemployment, and an overall dependence on the U.S. loans they had been provided. In 1925, the Locarno Treaty saw Germany, France, Belgium, Britain, and Italy agree to respect all post-Versailles borders. Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Poland also agreed to settle any future border disputes diplomatically.
Before I go to the border disputes, just very quickly go back to notes. Okay, I don't want to go too much into 1920s or mid 1920s first. Okay, so I wanted to have a very quick introduction on the Weimar Republic first. Okay, so I'm gonna use my PowerPoint slides now. Okay, to go into the details of the Weimar Republic first. Okay, not too much first. Because sometimes the video it runs and it has too much detail that I do not want you all to know yet lah, or else it will be too much okay, too much information. Okay, so in the first area here, it's the forming of the Weimar Republic. So they call it the Weimar Republic or the Weimar government. Okay, it's a parliament, it's a name, okay, that is being coined up. So the Weimar Republic was actually Germany's government from 1919 to 1933. Okay, so the period right after World War One until the rise of Nazi Germany lah. Okay, so starting from 1919. So right after the World War One actually ended, and then the Treaty of Versailles was signed. It was a new Weimar Republic. Okay, and because of the uncertain beginnings, okay, there was also a brief season of success and then followed by a devastating depression that actually occurred. And the Weimar Republic, they experienced a lot of chaos, lah, right, whereby it positioned Germany for the rise of Hitler and the Nazi Party. So there was a brief period of success. Then after that, there was this very, very bad, uh, a very downward depression, okay, because they started to print a lot of money, and there was also the economic difficulty lah of Germany trying to reclaim itself. So there was this very difficult period where just now in the video you mentioned it mentioned about the people of Germany suffering. There was no food. All right, there was hyperinflation. Prices of goods were very high, and then the value of their money actually dropped. Okay, so they blamed, of course, they blamed the Weimar lah. Okay, the Weimar Republic. Okay, so let's continue with the video. Okay, just let's very quickly continue with the video first. Oops, hold on for a second. So I have to toggle back and forth lah, huh? Let me see. Sorry, wrong one. Wrong one, sorry. Wait. Okay, so this is relatively short video. I think this video is much better lah for you all to understand it. Yes, this one is much better. Okay, yes, this one. Not too long. Okay.
July 1919, a National Assembly in Germany has agreed a new constitution by 262 votes to 75 votes, a constitution which becomes known as the Weimar Republic. 1919 to 33, the Weimar Constitution. The electorate, the people allowed to vote, under the Weimar Constitution consists of all men and women aged over 21. These people vote for a president every 7 years. The president plays no part in day-to-day politics. However, he does have some political powers. One of these powers is the power to choose the Chancellor. The Chancellor is the head of the German government and chooses all government ministers. Ministers are the people whose job it is to oversee a specific area of running the country, such as finances or foreign affairs. The most important of these ministers make up the cabinet, who are the most important decision-making body of the government. The Weimar Parliament is made up of two houses, who the electorate vote for every 4 years, the Reichstag and the Reichsrat. The Reichstag is the more powerful of these two houses. For instance, it controls taxation, and is directly elected by the people. The Reichsrat, however, is made to represent the regions of Germany, and each region sends a different number of representatives dependent upon its size. The bigger the region, the more people they send. Weimar Constitution.
I just want to share with you, they call it the Reichstag and the Reichsrat. It's basically the upper house and the lower house. In your notes, okay, so or else later, right, I will show you a diagram. It's actually a mind map diagram showing you the upper and the lower house. Okay, so the Reichsrat is actually the lower house, where the different regions of Germany will actually send a representative into the Weimar Parliament.
The Constitution has many strengths. For instance, it is democratic, more so than both Germany under the Kaiser and Britain at the time. The voting age had been reduced from 25 to 21, meaning even more people were able to vote. Furthermore, the Reichstag is elected using a system known as proportional representation, meaning a party gets one representative for every certain number of votes it gets.
Okay. Now, proportional representation, a party gets one representative for every certain number of votes it gets. So let's say, for example, if one particular party wins 40% of the votes, they will get 40% of the seats in the parliament. All right?
In the case of the Reichstag, every 60,000 votes elects one representative. The Constitution also has many checks and balances to stop any one person from gaining too much power over the Republic. Under normal circumstances, the Chancellor, the head of the government, can only pass laws if both the Reichstag and the Reichsrat vote for them. The Reichsrat, the least powerful of the two houses, can delay any new laws passed by the Reichstag unless the Reichstag overrules the Reichsrat by a 2/3 majority. Central government also has more power than it did under the Kaiser. However, local government still keeps some of its power, giving each of the 18 regions of Germany some of their own independence. However, there are also weaknesses to the constitution. Proportional representation means that smaller parties find it easier to gain seats in the Reichstag. Throughout the 1920s, 29 different parties hold seats in the Reichstag at some stage. This causes weakness, as it means there are often no majority governments, where one party holds more than half of the seats in the Reichstag, so coalitions have to be formed. These are governments where different parties team up, until between them they have more than half of the seats in the Reichstag. In order to do this, parties often have to compromise, meaning there is often a lack of clear, strong policies. Moreover, coalitions frequently fall apart. Between 1919 and 1923, there are 9 different coalition governments. Also, the new constitution is weak in times of crisis. The compromise needed to form coalitions means it is hard for them to give swift, clear decisions during a crisis. However, the constitution does have a way to get around this problem, known as Article 48. Article 48 allows the Chancellor to bypass the Reichstag in times of crisis. Instead, he can pass laws straight through the President. This article becomes open to exploitation as it allows the Chancellor to bypass democracy, and, by 1930, the Chancellor is regularly relying on Article 48. Not only is this undemocratic, but it makes the Constitution seem weak and encourages people to think that a single, all-powerful leader is better than an elected parliament. A fourth problem for the Constitution comes from the way it came about. During the German Revolution of 1918 to 19, the government had used force, relying on the army to subdue riots in Berlin. This contributes to the sense that the Weimar Republic isn't really the choice of the people. Furthermore, some parties elected to the Reichstag are openly opposed to democracy, such as the nationalists. Together with the communists, they openly despise the new constitution. The Weimar Republic has been created out of violence, without any real public enthusiasm. It is opposed by radicals and considered flawed by moderates. 1919 to 33, the Weimar Constitution. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe.
So this is a cute little illustration okay, of how the Weimar Republic was actually being formed and some of the benefits as well as the limitations of the Weimar. Okay, now let's look at this. Okay, I'm going to show you what I've actually created here to summarize how it actually looks like, how the Weimar Republic actually looks like. Okay, so we have the president. Okay, so the president is actually elected every 7 years, and of course the German people are the ones who vote for the president. They are the president is actually voted by the German people, but it is every 7 years. Now the president will control the armed forces. Okay, and of course it also votes with the help of the Reichstag. Then under the president, right, there is a very important article. It's called Article 48, like just now we saw in the video. The Article 48 is usually invoked during a case of an emergency, right? So during emergency, the president can actually make laws without going through the Reichstag, the parliament. By right, as you all know, right, in a democratic government, the president can have to go through the parliament first, and then through a series of processes, then laws can then be passed. But if it is an emergency requiring a very quick decision to be made, Article 48 will allow the president to actually make laws without having to go through the Reichstag. Okay, so this was actually supposed to be one of the benefits, okay, the strength of the Weimar government, because times of emergency, you cannot wait that long for these important decisions to be made, correct? It has to be made immediately. So the Article 48 is like a double-edged sword. Now, next, we have the chancellor. Now, the chancellor is like maybe a prime minister, so to speak, right? It is chosen by the president. Now, prime minister, unlike other democratic countries, it is voted. But no, the chancellor is actually chosen by the president. The president is voted by the by the German people. Okay, so the chancellor is actually being chosen, and it is a member. It is definitely have to be a member of the Reichstag. Okay, so they needed to become a chancellor. You need majority support from the Reichstag. Now, what does the chancellor actually need? What kind of support do they need now? The chancellor actually need support from the houses of parliament. Now, like I mentioned, right, there is the Reichstag, the lower house, and also the Reichstag, is supposed to be upper house. Okay, the Reichstag is the spelling error. Reichstag is the upper house. Reichstag is a lower house. Okay, now, uh, the Reichstag is actually voted by the German public using proportional representation. The Reichsrat is the lower house, sorry, because I copy paste. Each German state would send their representative. Okay, so this is how the Weimar government actually works. Very somewhat a little bit different from what we are tuned to. Okay, very unique. So again, I'm showing you another little diagram that I managed to find. Now, the president or the head of state is considered the most powerful, considered the most powerful, right? Then he is actually in charge of, let me take my laser pointer out first. He will then appoint a chancellor. Okay, the chancellor and its ministers, they are the ones who will work. All right, they will work on the day-to-day running of the government. Now, so the chancellor is like the prime minister lah. He proposed new law and overall in charge of running of the country together with its ministers. Now, the chancellor will actually chooses his ministers now. Okay, quite different, right? Now, under the president, there is also what we call uh, the Article 48. Okay, Article 48. Now, let's look at the Reichstag. The Reichstag is, of course, how they actually choose is 60,000 votes to one representation. Okay, so when they are able to get, say, a particular party gets about, say, 120,000 votes, then they will get 2 seats. Okay, now the Reichsrat is actually the deputies or the members that is being sent by the respective regions. Okay, because Germany actually have very smaller regions all over. Okay, so what we call states lah. So they will send their state representative into they call it the Reichsrat. Okay, the Reichsrat is actually the lower house. Reichstag is the upper house. Okay, now just now in the video, we mentioned about proportional representation. Now, proportional representation, if you look at it, right, it is actually supposed to be a fair system where the number of votes a party gets during an equation equates to the number of seats. So it has already been mentioned before. 60,000 votes equates to 1 seat. Okay, 60,000 votes. They would determine how many number of votes equates to how many seats. Sometimes it can be percentage, it can be now number of votes. So in the German proportional representation, how they calculate is 60,000 votes to 1 seat. So they felt like that at that time this was a fairer method compared to other countries. Britain actually has a different method, very similar to Singapore. Okay, and other countries like US also is also very different. Their voting methods and how they vote their ministers in, to run the daily affairs of the country is actually very different. So they felt that proportional representation is, I think, the most so-called most democratic method lah, the fairest method of all. Okay. Now, but there is also weakness of the Weimar government. Now, the weakness of the Weimar government, like just now the video that I actually showed you, correct? There were coalitions because of the proportional representation. It actually allowed these smaller parties, smaller political parties, to have a seat. So let's say even if I am a small party, small political party, but if I have achieved 60,000 votes, I will get 1 seat in the Weimar Republic. Okay, in the Weimar government, I will get 1 seat. If I have 120,000 votes, I will get 2 seats. So it actually allows very small political parties to be inside the Weimar government. Now, if you have so many of these small little parties, but then they don't really have much power. So it's actually very fragmented. Okay, it's very fragmented. So what do the smaller political parties do? The smaller political parties will form coalitions. Coalition means alliance lah. So a few of these smaller parties would join forces to become a coalition party. So a coalition government is because there's an instability of a coalition government. Why? Just now I mentioned before in the video, these coalitions, right, they can break apart very, very easily because it is just a it's like a union of convenience. So this coalition government can actually break apart and it can cause a lot of chaos. Okay, so if I can highlight to you what actually happened in neighboring country, Malaysia also had a coalition government, right? In the previous, not the recent election, right? The last election, 2018, right? 2018 election, they actually formed a coalition government, correct? They formed Pakatan Harapan. So after that, after a few months, right, it broke. It's the instability of a coalition government. All right. So same thing with the Weimar government, the coalition government. There was instability. Okay, where does the instability actually come in? Because all these several political parties, right, they actually have different viewpoints. Correct? They want to come together originally like to reduce the dominance of one party, but when they come together, they because of their differing views, their difference makes it very difficult for them to work together. Okay, so that is the weakness of the Weimar government. Now, in the instability of a coalition government, right? Now, there are small parties. So when there are small parties and there are so many different coalition governments, in the video, it said that during 1919 to about 1933, there was a total of 9 coalition governments. So you can imagine all these so-called coalition parties, right, grouped together, and they all cannot agree when they need to decide on important decisions, because of course what coalition governments or the so-called the opposition, they are there to oppose, correct? So it made it very, very difficult to decide on important decisions, which made it as if the Weimar government is not able to, you know, to react fast enough, right, to difficulties. So a lot of these coalition government parties, they also had extremist ideas, all right, and they were generally not willing to compromise lah. Okay, because they were saying if I compromise, then what's the point of me being there, isn't it? So there were a lot of infighting as well, unwilling to compromise. So they can imagine lah, right? They go round and round and round in circles, and therefore it was very difficult for them to come up with any important decisions. And finally, with all that frequent changes, right, and a lot of unwillingness to cooperate with one another, the coalition governments will keep breaking up. All right, so when the coalition government keeps breaking up, it leads to frequent changes to government. So if there are frequent changes to government, everything stays stagnant, right? The economy will also suffer, right? So this is the weakness lah of one of the weakness of the Weimar government. So what actually happened next? So because of the difficulty and the weakness of the coalition governments, it made the government, right, the Weimar government, very fragmented because there are so many small coalitions opposing and unwilling to compromise. So it becomes very fragmented, right? There's no one strong or one majority vote. So it resulted in the Weimar government not being able to function effectively and not being able to cater to the needs of the German people because they cannot come up with suitable decision making or firm plans. So they keep on fighting among each other. So therefore, the Weimar government was not able to function effectively. So if they cannot function effectively, cannot make certain decisions, they are not able to cater to the needs of the German masses because at that time, right, the economy was in shambles, right? People were facing poverty, there were no jobs, right? People were going hungry. So of course, it created a lot of anger and betrayal among the German masses, and therefore, as a result, they lost a lot of supporters because originally they supported the Weimar government, but those who used to support them, they lost all their supporters. Okay, all right. I will not continue the next the next slide already because uh, it is halfway here, halfway there lah. But I think what I want you to focus on today is mainly about the Weimar Republic first to begin with. Okay, let me show you another video. Okay, a video that is actually quite interesting. Okay, all of it are actually quite long-winded. Let me see. Right. Okay.
Used
Okay,
to
let's see.
describe the Weimar Republic, but successful isn't often one of them. It was plagued from the very start with immense political instability, economic problems, as well as international isolation. Long story short, it wasn't very fun. In the end, a mere 14 years after its creation, it was superseded by the Third Reich. Now, obviously, it was the new government that brought an end to the Weimar Republic, but why was Mr. Mustache voted into office, and what conditions led to so many Germans giving up on it and seeking an alternative? And just so we get this out the way, the Weimar Republic wasn't the country's official name, it was still formally known as the Deutsches Reich. So, a quick overview of how the Republic came into creation. Germany was on the cusp of losing the First World War, and the Kaiser fled the country, declaring his intention to abdicate. A coalition of left-wing politicians, mostly from the Social Democratic Party, declared in the town of Weimar the creation of a republic, which upset mostly everyone. And included within the term everyone were the communists, who were at this point trying to instigate communist revolution because that's kind of their thing. Afraid of communist revolution, the Social Democratic Party teamed up with right-wing paramilitary groups like the Freikorps to stop them. So the Weimar Republic didn't actually fail until 1933, but the events in the decade before are important to understanding why the German people disliked it. Germany didn't have a long democratic tradition like, say, the USA, and so the people weren't fiercely loyal to the concept of democracy itself, and many simply wanted security and prosperity. This, combined with Germany's humiliations in the wake of World War I or the hyperinflation crisis following 1921, meant that the German people just wanted stability. And to be clear, the role of the economic downturns in the fall of the Weimar Republic is hard to underestimate. Since many Germans were genuinely impoverished, and when the democratic institutions of the Weimar Republic failed to relieve the issues, it's unsurprising that people turned to any alternative they could, which caused more problems for the ruling politicians because of the voting system in place. This system was proportional representation, which, to simplify, allocated the seats in the German parliament based upon the national proportion of votes the parties achieved in elections. Since the German public was highly divided on pretty much everything, no party was ever going to get more than 50% of the votes, and so parties had to form coalitions, but it wasn't long before even this proved impossible. And this, in case you're wondering, is why the Communist Party struggled to gain power, because they wholeheartedly refused to work under any circumstances with the largest party. Furthermore, those running the Republic weren't exactly enamoured with the idea of democracy. Right-wing political parties often rallied against the Republic, and many, at least initially, wished for the return of the Kaiser. And it was these combined factors, economic problems, political polarisation, a fairly prevalent disdain for democracy, and international weakness that severely undermined the Republic. The lack of stable majority also meant that whatever new issues arose, there was little ability to fix them without a lot of squabbling. In fact, the only way of getting anything done was to use the president's executive powers, which could be increased during emergencies. Thus, it shouldn't be surprising that when one party whose side hadn't relinquished the initiative stepped forward and presented a new idea, it became popular fairly quickly. They denounced the idea that Germany was guilty of causing World War I, gave Germans a scapegoat for their loss, promised an end to the political squabbling, and reunify the fractious German nation. The Weimar Republic's failure shouldn't be seen as inevitable. It was the perfect storm of factors that broke the Republic, and had one or two of these factors not been present, it may well have survived. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you for watching, with thanks to my Patreon supporters whom you can see on screen now.
He reads very, very fast. Okay, but worry. Okay, I will be repeating this over and over again because this is actually a very, very important introductory or an overview before we actually do the rise of Hitler. We got to study the Weimar Republic, the limitations as well as its successes, and how the Weimar Republic actually comes about to fully understand, right, how it actually sets the platform for the next stage, which is the rise of Hitler. Okay, the rise of Hitler is actually the interesting part lah. Okay, the interesting part. But of course, we needed to know a little bit more about the Weimar Republic, which again, don't worry, in the next round, I will still go through another one more round of the Weimar Republic because I noticed that this is actually a very, very huge chapter, very different from the kind of from the level of Sec 2 history. So I'm going a little bit slower, so not to worry. Okay, and I will always repeat back what I have what that I have actually covered right in the previous lesson to make sure that you can catch up. Okay, all right. So, okay, girls, I'll see you next week. I hope you enjoy this recording. Okay, bye.